Stigmata, or stigmatics, people who express the same wounds that Jesus Christ endured on the cross, that supernaturally manifest on their physical bodies. Is stigmata a real phenomenon from the divine, or is there more of a natural explanation? The truth may surprise you. Since the movie about Italian priest St Padre Pio is coming out this month, and he's the most well-known stigmatic, I think we should take a closer look at this. Stigmata, supernatural wounds appearing out of nowhere, it's all happening, it's all happening, it's all happening, it's all happening, it's all happening. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Carlos Santiago. Today, I'm going to share with you well-documented cases of people experiencing stigmata. For many years, people claim to have seen Jesus or Virgin Mary in normal everyday objects, such as toast, bananas, potato chips, or even hot Cheetos. But what happens when you start to see the presence of Jesus and his wounds he bore on the cross on your physical body? Especially the wounds from the 9-inch nails in his hands, wrists, or feet while being hung on the cross. Sometimes people even report to have manifestations of the wound Jesus suffered from the Roman soldier who pierced his side with a spear. Some have strange crosses appear on their arms or even their face, way before rappers popularized it. The first documented case of stigmata was St. Francis of Assisi, Italy in 1224. Since then, there have been over 300 documented genuine cases of stigmata. Almost 100 of those were Catholic saints or blessed by the Catholic Church. So non-Catholic Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists, they aren't getting this. And more women than men are experiencing this phenomenon. The most famous of these cases is that of St. Padre Pio, but I'm discussing him in part 2 of this series. But for now, let's take a closer look at some of the modern cases of stigmata.
George Hamilton lives on an estate in the outskirts of Glasgow. He's a devout Roman Catholic, and like many stigmatics before him, is unable to eat. He survives from a drip feed through his nose.
I've been looking for something unusual about George for some time. Having known him for some years before, I've always felt as if there's been something missing from his story, but this is something unusual.
Not too bad.
Right, what can we do for the day?
Your prescription.
Right. Can you take it off? Do you want me to take it off?
Huh?
On you go. You tear my hair there. Oh gosh, right.
It's still running.
It's still running. That's worse than the first time, eh?
Uh-huh.
Still going on. Any other spots come up? I know the other hand, but has there been any other points since I saw you last?
This bit in the sides.
Right.
Don't think I really showed you that
No, I
before.
haven't seen that before. He has told me on more than one occasion that he really doesn't want this. He would quite like it to go away. So I don't see someone perpetuating this problem when he's told me that he really sometimes wishes it just goes away because there's too much hassle attached to it.
Well, before I actually started bleeding, I always did have pain in my hands and my feet and various parts of my body. I always put it down to maybe the work I was doing. So one afternoon I was working in the living room and I felt a sharp thrust of pain up my right arm and then the left. I never really gave it much thought, except it was awful sore. And I forgot about it until the next morning I woke up and...
Just to summarize here, this guy is a Roman Catholic who had pains in both of his arms that woke up the next morning with both of his hands bleeding. Not to mention, for some reason, now he can't even eat food, so he has to get his nourishment through a tube.
Is it something that you wish had never happened to you?
Sometimes you think it seems to be more a curse than a blessing.
More of a curse?
From the cases I have researched on stigmata happening to regular people who are non-church clergy, find it way more of a curse and are confused as to why it happened to them. Most do not get supernatural gifts or anything accompanying stigmata, so it's a nuisance to keep tending the wounds. Not to mention, without spiritual gifts, I'm sure people just want to avoid them and probably aren't treated the best. But then again, some do get a lot of attention and people come from all over to see them, like this next lady, an Irish housewife who claims she is experiencing the suffering of Christ.
The Lord is with thee. Well, I began to receive pain or get pain in my hands, in my wrists, and in my head. It was not a headache, it was like as if a piercing, as if there was a hole, an existing hole there, and you could feel an instrument or something go through my head. And as time went on, the pain developed to marks. It would be red patches in my wrists, and the pain continues. The pain is much greater when there is no marks.
One discrepancy I want to point out between these two stigmatics is that the guy has wounds on his actual hands and the lady has wounds on her wrists. So which stigmata is more historically accurate? Well, there was an in-depth scientific study done as part of the National Geographic's Channel documentary called Quest for Truth, the Crucifixion. The scientific experiments concluded that the nails used to hang people on crosses were likely driven through the wrist and not the hand, since the palms of your hand won't be able to hold the weight and would tear right through. So whose stigmata is more believable and plausible? Keep in mind, even the revered St Padre Pio had wounds on his hands and not his wrists. So let's carry on and see what else this lady says about the pain she endures. As someone that knows how to read people and analyze body posturing, take a look how she answers these next questions about her headaches and migraines. I'm not saying she's lying, I'm just saying pay attention.
And the pain continues. The pain is much greater when there is no marks.
She was completely out of herself, and she's suffering this intense suffering, and she's talking about, oh, the crown of thorns, oh, the crown of thorns. And she put her hands up to her head and tried to take the thorns out, you know.
In fact, it was gradually getting worse, and I felt as if I was nearly going unconscious, nearly to the point I felt I was dying. And then I wasn't aware of an awful lot more, only seeing flashes of the face of Jesus. And at that point, I truly was begging him to take away the pain, because I didn't think I could cope. I felt I was dying through the pain.
Some people might say you're describing symptoms of severe migraines or depression or hallucination.
Well, I've had migraine, and when you go through those experiences, you feel the thorn go directly through my head. It's not a question of a migraine. I know what headaches are or a migraine is, and it's nothing like that. And to the Son,
Although Christina currently displays no outward sign of the stigmata, she says she is in pain all the same.
So she doesn't have any physical symptoms of stigmata. She has internal symptoms. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and watch her face when she answers these next questions.
Do you feel pain at the moment?
a little.
Where?
In my head.
And your wrists?
No.
Do you feel pain most of the time?
Roughly about 90% of the time.
90% of the time? God, please forgive me for doubting if that is all you, but I'm just keeping a skeptical ear and testing all spirits. All right, so this next one is pretty interesting. This lady also has signs of stigmata, and her wounds bleed even more during the holiest days of the Roman Catholic calendar.
Heather Woods is a deacon in the small Holy Celtic Church in Lincoln. As she assisted her bishop at the Good Friday service last year, her wounds were clearly visible.
By his wounds we have been healed. But you are he that took me out of the world.
Heather's stigmata had first appeared a year earlier in 1992.
They first appeared, it was Bank Holiday Monday, May the 3rd. And it just started as a little blister. And you know, if you do painting or you're writing for a long time, and I just noticed it and I thought, oh, I wonder what I've done to get that. And I showed my friend and thought nothing more of it. But then the next day, another blister appeared here, and within 2 days, a blister was on the tops of my hands, and these had started to weep. So Father Eric, He's my priest and a very dear friend. I showed them to him. We went to see him, and he obviously recognised it and told me what he thought it was, the stigmata, and he explained that. And I said, oh dear, what's going to happen? You know, why me? I suppose the question we always ask.
Well, when you first saw the marks in Heather's hands, did you know what was happening to her?
Yes, I'd already forewarned her that I thought she might have. She had this funny sensation in the palms of the hands, and I said to her before I went off to France, don't be at all surprised if you don't get the stigmata. Strange as it may seem, and it was exactly what happened, yes.
It's quite raw. It's a dark pinky colour. The skin is broken underneath, but it doesn't look normally as if it would bleed, but it does actually weep. It just comes up through the skin. All the wounds do. And I have found that when I've washed them all over, it just continues to bleed.
She also claims to have a cross appear on her forehead ever so often. I don't think she's dropping a rap album or diss track anytime soon, so I have no opinion why crosses would appear there. However, she did get an official letter from her doctor signing off that there was no medical explanation for her wounds, so this might be legit. But even more fascinating is since her stigmata started, she now draws religious art and writes complex mystical texts way beyond her knowledge. And get this, she always writes them with her left hand, but she is right-handed. And also notice how different the writing style is from one paragraph to the next. It seems like many different people wrote this. Now let's listen to this historian who did quite a bit of research into this phenomenon talk about frauds.
Yes, there have been a few cases in our own time of frauds where people have been discovered sort of actually working up the marks and so on. But really these are comparatively rare. I think you can look back through the generality of stigmatics, many of whom have been very, very closely scrutinized in their time because, you know, these were quite extraordinary things happening. The 19th century, a great deal of scientific work was done. You know, one stigmatic had her arm sort of encased in a special glass case so that she could not get at the at her wrist or her hands at all to actually tweak up the marks, as it were, and yet the marks would still appear.
This guy is a little difficult to understand, but in case you missed it, he said there are some scientific studies done on stigmatics, and one of the cases, a woman's arm was completely encased in some type of glass, and she had no way of etching or causing the stigmata marks to appear. Yet, they still appeared. Alright, so there's no denying that stigmata is actually happening to some people. In cases of accompanying spiritual gifts, that may point to why some priests or even everyday people get it. Perhaps a sign of God's greater plan or purpose somehow? Man's simple thinking cannot rationalize with the ways of God. But now, if you are ready, then we can dive into how some people get stigmata. But only if you're ready. Spoiler alert, this is the plot twist.
While some Christians might wish to enter Christ's suffering in this physical way, most stigmatics maintain they don't want the wounds.
Consciously, perhaps, they didn't want them to appear. Unconsciously, they could have done quite easily. Our unconscious mind is very, very strong indeed, even perhaps stronger than our conscious mind, because it governs our conscious mind.
Oh my Jesus.
The psychological framework wherein someone's unconscious mind might want to wish wounds upon themselves is one thing, but that doesn't explain how the marks actually appear on the skin of a particular few.
But that stuff that we gave you the last time you thought helped you.
The medical profession is not able to offer an all-embracing explanation, but it does accept that it is possible for the mind to change the body. At the University Hospitals of Cleveland, Ohio, study has been carried out into a medical phenomenon called psychogenic purpura.
The idea of psychogenic purpura, the reproduction of wounds, injuries on the body, seems perfectly to meet the point that I am making, which is that suffering, wish, belief, personal preoccupation can have physical manifestation.
A gulf still remains between the appearance of general bruising and specific wounds. Yet the case of a psychiatric patient reported in the medical journal The Lancet in 1946 tells of a dramatic and specific example of the mind's power.
This young man was seemingly reliving a time back 10 years before in which he had been bound up as a psychiatric patient when people were less liberal. His arms had been bound. And the ropes from that binding were reappearing in the course of his mentally reliving that experience 10 years later. It was effectively a form of stigmata which was actually happening before the psychiatrist's eyes.
Yet can it be possible for the mind to produce marks relating not to an individual's direct experience, but to an execution 2,000 years ago? Dr. Marco Magnelli says he has seen it happen.
Okay, in this movie we are observing the phenomenology of Domenica LoBianco during the Holy Week of 2 years ago. Here you can see the date.
Every Easter in Briatico in the south of Italy, Domenica LoBianco produces these peculiar stigmata, even more specific than the usual nail marks. She says they represent the rosary and the stars.
In the Good Friday, she has such wounds, namely a cross, some mark, and two big circles on the left arm. In the next day, Saturday, the appearance of the wound is this. So they are vanishing.
Now, if that isn't confirmation to what I've been saying in prior videos, your mind can produce supernatural results. And let's watch the video of this woman during a hypnotic regression session and see what happens.
Dr. Magnelli's team carried out psychological tests on Domenica LoBianco. During questioning, she became emotional and agitated. Then, through hypnosis, she entered a trance-like state, and her skin began to change.
The most important happening during our tests or examination was that from a normal skin, the stigmata became visible.
From the start, when her skin was clear, through to the moment when the signs of the wounds also emerged, was this woman under your constant observation?
Absolutely. We were 5 people, and we videotaped all the inquiry, and she was all the time with us. So I think that this is a very strong and important scientific result.
So what do you guys think? Is stigmata caused by a divine being, or is it just a product of our deep emotions and subconscious thoughts intertwining? This video easily could have been part of my Your Thoughts Are Making You Sick series. It's scientifically proven, as well as plenty of empirical evidence that says that your mind can create stigmata. But is it always the case? Or is it only the case when people don't have accompanying spiritual gifts, like healing or prophecy? I don't have the answers.